This is Dirk Twine, and I will be speaking with Dr. Joel Wallach, the mineral doctor. Dr. Wallach is considered the premier authority on nutrition in the United States. He has written more than a dozen books on health and nutrition and countless peer-reviewed papers. One of his earliest books exposed the consequences of nutritional deficiencies in animals and humans, entitled Diseases of Exotic Animals, and is currently in the U.S. Smithsonian Institute and has been declared a national treasure. Dr. Wallach's research and discovery of the 90 essential nutrients required for animals and humans was groundbreaking, and the fact that 60 of the 90 nutrients are minerals has garnered Dr. Wallach the title of the Mineral Doctor. Greetings, this is Dirk Twine speaking with Dr. Joel Wallach, the mineral doctor. Dr. Wallach and I will discuss the vegetarian diet. However, before we begin the discussion, I would like Dr. Wallach to briefly share with us some of the more than 40 years of biomedical research and clinical medicine experience that he has in nutrition and in health.
Well, thank you, Dirk. The thing that makes me different when it comes to being a health practitioner is that I have a degree in agriculture. In the agricultural industry, we don't have health insurance for animals, so we learned how to prevent reverse diseases with nutritional formulas. We've known for over 100 years that our food supply for livestock and humans is deficient, and so we do have to make up that difference. Went on to get a degree in veterinary medicine, and then I became a comparative pathologist in one project with the National Institutes of Health, the Centers for the Biology of Natural Systems, Washington University, St. Louis. I actually did over 20,000 autopsies from zoos and human beings living near the zoos, some 17,500 autopsies and over 454 species of zoo animals and 3,000 humans for comparison, 10 million chemistries, 10 million slides with special stains, looking for pollution primarily, but also looking for nutritional deficiencies. And actually published the first paper ever in the United States on a mass die-off from pollution in 1962. And that actually set my career off in the particular direction that I wound up with one paper. Then went to, as I say, graduated veterinary school, then became a physician, began treating patients as a primary care physician in 1978. And so I've got 35 years of experience in translating animal nutrition into human nutrition. Of course, a lot of my patients would have a lot of fun with that. And they say, well, if you're not happy with your doctor, go see Wallach. Now, he'll treat you like a dog, but you get better.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you, Doc. As a vegetarian for nearly 20 years, I'm very eager to hear your perspective on vegetarianism. So let's get started. Firstly, I'd like to share something that probably most people are unaware of. The word vegetarian comes from the Latin word vegetus, which means whole, energetic, and full of life. It was coined in the 1840s in England. So that phrase has been around for quite some time. However, in the U.S. today, it has a slightly different meaning. It seems to have expanded since the inception of the philosophy and the practice. Let's look at the various types of vegetarians in the U.S. First, we'll start out with vegan, spelled V-E-G-A-N, but pronounced vegan. A person that eats a plant-based diet exclusively, fruits, vegetables, nuts, grains, seeds, legumes, or beans. A lacto is a person that eats a plant-based diet, but also includes dairy products, such as cow's milk and its byproducts, cheese, yogurt, sour cream, etc. Ovo is a person that eats a plant-based diet also, but includes eggs from either chickens or duck or some other type of animal. Pesco is a person that eats a plant-based diet, but includes fish. And then polo is a person that eats the plant-based diet and also includes chicken. However, the only true vegetarian is the vegan, and all others are consuming animal flesh. Hence, nutritionally, they are nearly the same. Therefore, our discussion will primarily be about the vegan vegetarian diet. I think we will try to express the challenges of that type of diet. So, Doc, let's begin with the most frequently asked question of vegetarians. Can the vegetarian diet meet all nutritional needs, particularly protein?
In modern times, the answer to that is no. And I'm always sad when people pay primarily attention to protein. This is a vegan's mantra. Oh, we mix legumes and grains together so we get perfect protein. Well, that's only one of the 90 essential nutrients. They're leaving themselves out of the other 89. It's that leaving out of the other 89 that get vegans in trouble. You think about some of the more famous vegans. Linda McCartney, Paul McCartney, the Beatle, his wife, actually made more money selling her prepared vegan meals and her vegan cookbook. She made more money. She made billions of dollars as opposed to the Beatles. She made more money than they did as a singing group, and she died at 52. Then you look at Michael Jackson, whose life was really messed up, and he was a vegan. You look at Steve Jobs. He was a vegan. He died at 56, and so on. And so veganism is problematic, and the reason is the assumption when you eat a vegan diet is that everything is perfect, and it's not. What you're doing is you're depending on getting all 90 essential nutrients on the throw of a dice every morning. What if I were to prepare a game for you, Dirk, and say, okay, let's play a game. We're going to agree for the rest of our lives we're going to play this game. You wake up in the morning and you throw the dice, and if you get any number but snake eyes, which is a 1 on both dice, you get to live another day. But if you get snake eyes, you shoot yourself in the head.
That's not a good game.
That's not a good game, because eventually you're going to hit snake eyes, aren't you?
That's right.
Even though it's saying, well, I mean, come on, how often is that going to happen? But you're going to wind up shooting yourself in the head if you follow the rules of the game. The same with veganism. There are some communities around the world who can practice veganism because of dumb luck, because they've got 60, 70 minerals in their soil, and all the nutrients they grow in the soil, all the plants they grow in the soil will suck up these minerals. They use wood for fuel. They're third world cultures. They use wood for fuel, and they're putting the wood ashes, which really aren't ashes, which are the minerals that are left when you burn the tree for fuel. They put that in the garden, and the trees take up those minerals, which are recycling those 60 essential minerals. We're talking about really isolated places, very few. Out of 7 billion people on Earth, we're talking about maybe 200 people. Okay, less than 4, less than 1%, obviously, 1,000ths of 1% could eat well and get everything they need. And so we actually began to shoot ourselves. In fact, the guy who invented McCormick farming equipment, he died in his 30s from pernicious anemia because he was a vegan. I mean, he was one of the first billionaires in America, along with the steel makers, Carnegie and people like that. And his name was McCormick, and he died of pernicious anemia. Actually took a tour of the facility, his original plant, and they said he died of pernicious anemia. And I said, oh, that's just a B12 deficiency. And they said, well, yeah, he died of B12 deficiency because he was a vegan.
Okay. That was a great analogy that you gave, but I like to, when I speak to people about supplementing, I like to give a car analogy. If I was leaving Atlanta, Georgia, going to California, and my fuel gauge didn't work, I would certainly fill up my car on a daily basis to make sure that I had enough fuel to make it across the country. And I think that's analogous to what you were saying in terms of we can't take the chance on running out of gas. We have to fuel ourselves on a daily basis. And my understanding, and correct me if you may, that the main reason that we're eating food on a daily basis is to get nutrients from that food. We're not eating for taste. We're not eating because it's pretty. We're eating because our body requires nutrients.
Well, you're exactly right. These 90 essential nutrients have that funny little word in there, essential. These are not the 90 optional nutrients. They're as predictable as gravity. You will die if you're missing these things. Some of them, like potassium, if you don't have any potassium in your diet, your heart will stop and you'll die within seconds after being totally deficient in potassium. On the other hand, if you're deficient in calcium, you might live 40 years, but you're going to have osteoporosis, you'll get fractures, you get kidney stones, your teeth will fall out, you get high blood pressure, you get bone spurs and calcium deposits. You'll wind up with all these weird diseases, which support the orthopedic surgeons very well, thank you. Urologists for kidney stones and dentists for periodontal disease, all of which are simple calcium deficiency diseases. But eventually you'll fall and fracture a hip, and so secondary is a secondary cause of the calcium deficiency. You will die. And so every one of these essential nutrients is required every day in optimal amounts. And I'm 73 now, Dirk, and I've been taking these 90 essential nutrients twice a day since I was 9 years old, since I was 9. And I've been blessed with good health, haven't been to a doctor with me being the patient in 64 years. And I've never been on a prescription medication. And this is because I have gone out of my way to supplement my food. And I eat well. I eat very well because, again, I have a degree in agriculture. I'm a veterinarian. I'm a physician. I'm a pathologist. And so I know you have to eat well, and I eat well, but I don't depend on the nutrients in the food. I just look at nutrients in the food as value added. And to me, eating is more of a social event because I supplement twice a day with the 90 essential nutrients. I take in probably, in some cases, 25,000 times the minimum data requirement. You heard that number right.
25,000.
So 25,000 times the minimum data requirement, okay? And people say, well, how do you keep going? How can you do 300 free lectures a year and you're never worn out, you're never angry, you're never depressed? I said, well, it's because I take the 90 essential nutrients twice a day, but I don't take them. I don't minimize. I don't take them at the minimum data requirement, okay? For instance, selenium The minimum data requirement, according to the government, is 60 micrograms a day. It prevents heart disease, dementia, things like MS, cataracts, prevents liver cirrhosis, prevents cardiomyopathy, heart disease, prevents cancer, prevents certain types of anemia, prevents certain types of vascular disease, certain types of arthritis, certainly can some types of thyroid problems, are all due to a selenium deficiency. And so am I going to risk, eating just well and hoping it's in there, just like Brazil nuts? There is a myth out there that you can eat 3 Brazil nuts a day and get all the selenium you want. Well, Brazil nuts don't require selenium.
Right.
Okay. Now, if that Brazil nut tree was grown in soil rich in selenium, it'll have some selenium in there. But you can't tell by looking at that Brazil nut to see if there's any in there because it doesn't require it. On the other hand, if you look at a tree or a tomato plant that requires magnesium to make the green leaves and the chlorophyll so they can use the sun's energy for growth and production of whatever it is it's producing, seeds for the next generation. If it doesn't have magnesium, the leaves turn yellow. And once you see brown or yellow leaves on a plant, you know there's not enough magnesium in there. So if there's minimum magnesium, the plant will pump that magnesium from the lower leaves into the growth leaves at the top. And so that's why the growth leaves at the top are always green and the lower leaves are the ones that turn brown because the plant is stealing from the lower leaves to give to the growth leaves. And so the same thing is true for us. You get diseases when you're deficient in these nutrients. Plants only need 3: magnesium, phosphorus, potassium. So if you're eating a pretty good slice of organically grown multigrain bread baked with love by the pastor's wife who's a vegan, you're 57 short.
Absolutely. Let's look back at what you just mentioned about the calcium, back up to the calcium
sure.
loss and continue with the protein piece. It's said that protein consumption causes calcium loss. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, that's true because protein always has phosphorus associated with it. And the more phosphorus you increase in your diet, the more calcium you need. You need to be taking in a ratio of 2 calcium atoms per 1 atom of phosphorus. Well, if you're eating lots of proteins, you're getting lots of phosphorus, lots of phosphates, and that increases your amount of calcium you have. Let's say you take in 100 grams of phosphorus a day in a pound of meat. Well, that means you need 4 pounds of meat if there's calcium in it, or at least the equivalent of 4 times that much calcium to make it right.
Okay.
And so if you look in my book, Rare Earths Forbidden Cures, in Chapter 11 under calcium, I show you the different types of food you eat and the common average amounts of phosphorus and calcium in them and how much you have to supplement to make up that difference. Well, in the animal industry, we've spent $100 billion figuring that out, just for calcium, Dirk.
Okay.
$100 billion. And so when you look at a guinea pig pellet, a little alfalfa pellet for guinea pigs, a rabbit pellet, chicken pellet, duck pellet, turkey pellet, mouse pellet, you have kibbles and bits dog food, we've perfected it. And anything that's in that dog food or rabbit food or guinea pig food or rat food or mouse food or chicken food, anything that's actually in the food from a nutritional standpoint, whether it's protein or whether it's minerals or vitamins, is value added. We do not depend on it. For the vegan, because they're eating well, it tastes good, looks good to the eye, eating well, fits their philosophy, they're going to get nailed just out of dumb chance. Out of just dumb chance, it's impossible to get everything you need just by eating well. And so they will get them eventually.
Yeah, so let's look at the vegetarian philosophy in terms of there's certain foods that supposedly provide you with lots of calcium. Things like green leafy vegetables, soy, sea vegetables, molasses, and almonds and figs are all supposedly great sources of calcium. What would you say to a vegetarian that's trying to eat that way?
I would still supplement with calcium. And then you got from those fruits and
Absolutely.
vegetables, I would look at that as value added. I can't stress that enough that human beings are supposedly at the top end of the intelligence ranking compared to other animals, other vertebrates. And you can supplement. We actually have supplement programs that vegans use. There's no animal products in there. And it's insane. Why would you throw away 50 years of your life because you don't want to supplement to prove a point? It's impossible. It's impossible. Even these cultures that live in the world that are vegans, they do eat a vegan diet because they're poor. They don't have lands to graze animals and have animals. They don't live near a sea where they can get fish. And just by necessity or just by bad luck or where they chose to live or where they were driven by their enemies, they learned to exist on a vegan diet. Well, many, many peoples and animals have disappeared. The species that didn't make it or the cultures that didn't make it, they disappeared. But by dumb luck, by just dumb luck, Dirk, there's the top 20 cultures on Earth, the top longevity cultures on Earth. They live in places that have more than 60 minerals in their soil. When they burn the wood for fuel, for cooking and heating, they put those minerals, those those AKA wood ashes into their gardens. And their tomatoes and sweet potatoes and beets and rice and whatever it is they're growing, fruit trees and so forth, onions, suck all those 60, 70 minerals up. That's what makes us different. Our mineral source are plant minerals. They're based from plants. It's an ancient compost pile. Contains 77 minerals, including all 60 essential minerals. So we're different in that we provide and guarantee all 60 essential minerals where nobody else can do that. And so it makes us different. You look at baby food. This is very scary. This just came out in April of 2012. Baby foods that we entrusted our babies to over the years, Similac, Enfamil, Gerber's, have 13 or less minerals in it. And we need 60. You take a baby and you feed him a baby formula, well, the 13 minerals in it. How many minerals are in there? 13.
13.
What about the other 47? Baby doesn't have. You wonder why the baby's screwed up. Well, the babies are screwed up mentally and physically, not because of vaccinations. Now, vaccinations, there are kids who are terribly damaged by vaccinations, but we're looking at 3 out of 1,000 terrible damage. And, I wouldn't vaccinate kids except for when there's a plague going through there and 10,000 people are dying an hour. Then you want to take your chances and get that vaccination, right? That risk is worth it. But when everything's going well and people are practicing good hygiene, plumbing is working, and you're eating well, you're supplementing properly, I wouldn't vaccinate. And you can opt out. Everybody can sign that opt-out form. But you can never not supplement. These longevity cultures do supplement. Well, you said they're a third world culture. They are illiterate. They can't read. How would they know about supplementing? Well, by dumb luck, they practice putting wood ashes, aka plant minerals, aka wood ashes, back into the garden.
And that seems to have happened in every culture around the world
that
for
survived.
Thousands of years.
That
yes.
survived.
Yes.
That's the caveat here. In every continent on Earth, the surviving cultures all put wood ashes into their garden. Pregnant women would eat wood ashes. They had these terrible cravings. They would eat wood ashes during their pregnancy. And these are where the minerals come from. Now, what happened at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, 1882?
Electricity.
You got it. Thomas Edison pulled the switch on the first commercial electric generating plant on Pearl Street in New York City on the bluff overlooking the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge. Every time I go to New York, I visit that site because that is the thing that killed millions of people. Because how many wood ashes, how many plant minerals do you have left over? How much powder do you have left over to put in your garden when you burn electricity for fuel?
Zero.
What about propane or natural gas?
Zero.
What about solar energy?
Zero.
Oh my goodness! Green can be bad unless you supplement. You got to supplement. Then you're not throwing your life away based on the throw of a dice every morning. I mean, why would you do that to your kids? Why would you do that to your loved ones? Why would you do that to yourself? I mean, just think about it. If Steve Jobs, if Linda McCartney and Michael Jackson would have supplemented with minerals, Michael Jackson, Steve Jobs, and Linda McCartney all be still alive today.
Oh, fantastic. It's unfortunate that they didn't. Let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
How much protein do you recommend we eat per day?
Well, just for maintenance, a 150-pound person requires 45 grams of pure protein. Well, to get 45 grams of pure protein, like you get in a laboratory setting, you might have to eat 2 pounds of protein, in its gross form, as beans and meat and eggs and that kind of stuff, to get enough protein in the proper ratios and so forth. And so I like to err on the side of excess. I for instance, this morning I had 4 poached eggs.
Okay.
I had 2 ounces of yogurt, cherry yogurt, and I had coffee with my chocolate added to it. So I had my mocha cafe, the flavanols, the lower blood pressure, and give me some antioxidant points, some auric points. And I had nuts and I had grapefruits.
Okay.
So I have plus all my supplements.
So how many grams of protein would you say that you had this morning?
In an egg protein, I think there's 27 grams of protein per egg.
Okay.
So I got over 100 grams of protein, which is about double what they recommend.
Okay.
Very high quality protein. When you look at the biological value of protein, eggs is 100, red meat is 65, dairy is 85. So it goes 100 for eggs, 85 for dairy, 65 for red meat. You get down to in the 50s, 52 to 55 for beans, and it's in the 40s, 42 to 45 for grains as a biological value. In other words, that you can absorb them as a human being and employ them into rebuilding your own protein. So if you have a granny who's, say, 75 years old and she's losing muscle mass because her digestion isn't real good, are you going to give her a vegan diet and give her beans and protein, beans and grain, or are you going to give her eggs?
Probably eggs.
Probably
Because she's
eggs.
eating them anyway.
Yeah, exactly. That's why she's 75, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, she should be getting egg protein because it's of high biological value. Now, here's the thing that I get from really well-meaning people, Dirk, and they say, well, Come on, Wallach. Look at a cow. You get 1,000-pound dairy cow, like a Holstein cow. She weighs 1,000 pounds. Did she eat meat? No. Did she eat eggs? Well, no. Did she eat fish or chicken? No. Why do I need this? She's living on grass out there. She grew to be 1,000 pounds. Well, two things happened there. Number one, she has 4 stomachs. She's got 100 million friends in that one called a rumen. Those 100 million friends are able to digest fiber and turn it into amino acids. Fiber is just a string of carbon. But those little bugs in there, some of them animal, some of them plant material, will take nitrogen and put it onto the carbon chains and turn them into amino acids. And then you're able to add sulfur to that in your body and turn it into insulin. Okay, now, cow does all that by just eating grass and green plants growing on the soil. Goats can do it by eating twigs, and they browse, they eat twigs and bushes and things where cows don't. But it's all the same thing. Goats have 4 stomachs. If you look at all the 6 continents on Earth that have animal life on it, the most universal form of animal life all over the world is a rumen, is a 4-stomach animal. Why in the old days, in the exploration days, in the settling days of America, here in North America, do they use oxen to pull wagons instead of horses?
Because they ate grass.
Because they ate grass, and they could live on and do very well, thank you, on the prairie grasses, and you didn't need to bring a separate wagon to haul feed for. Well, horses are a single stomach animal like you and me, and they can't eat the same thing as cattle can, and so they had to bring an extra wagon full of grains for the horses.
Okay.
And so that's why they use oxen, because oxen could live off the land, but horses, you had to carry their food with you.
Well, that leads me to another question I had for you. Is it true that all foods have protein? And what's the difference between animal and vegetable protein? You gave us an example of protein values, but what's the difference between the two types of proteins, and do all foods have protein?
All foods do not have protein. Okay? There's no protein in honey. There's no, but if you look at something like an apple, there's not much protein in an apple unless you eat the seeds. The protein that's in an apple is in the seed.
Okay.
And when you look at a red delicious apple, what is the weight of the seeds, the 2 dozen seeds that might be in that apple? It's not even 1% of the weight of that apple. They're very tiny little seeds to make an apple. There's extremely small amounts of protein in that fruit. The more concentrated forms of protein are in our grains and in seeds, and also beans, legumes, beans, peas, lentils, things of this nature. Also in peanuts, which can be problematic because of the aflatoxins, which is a byproduct of aspergillus infestation, fungus infestation, causes liver cancer, liver disease, liver cirrhosis. So that's a negative there, getting protein from peanut. And I hear that all the time because I travel around this country. I give 300 free lectures all over. I meet people, of every religion. I meet people who have different food allergies. I meet people who have different dietary beliefs. And so I see people who eat everything you can think of. And there's the universal thing, the universal shortages are minerals. Proteins, everybody can kind of get along. Your body has a great capacity to take amino acids produced by just about anything and turn it into protein. And so usually vegans have to eat quite a bit during the day. They eat great volumes of food, as well as maybe eat 4, 5, 6, 7 meals a day. They're constantly grazing during the day, if you want to use that term. And the same thing like a cow. There's so little food value in grass. That cow is eating all day, constantly. That's her job, is just to eat all day and hopefully get. And there's a lot of places on Earth where animals don't grow. There's no animal because there's no nutrition in the soil. So if you want to grow animals there, just because there's grass, the grass only needs 3 minerals, right? Cow needs 60.
Right.
And so you're going to have to supplement that. This is one terrible study that I did in Qishan, China. In Qishan, China, there's no selenium in the soil. In Qishan, China, there's no selenium in the soil. They have the highest rate of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy heart attacks in kids of anywhere in the world. My wife and I went there, and over a 6-week period, we did 1,200 autopsies, and kids below the age of 10 who died of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy heart disease was a selenium deficiency. They're all poor subsistence farmers. They didn't have enough animals to provide cheese or meat for these kids. Chickens couldn't live without supplementing them, and so they just lived on grain and vegetables they could grow in the garden. They grew vegetables and grain. These kids would die of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy heart disease. So we showed them how to supplement with selenium and a multiple, and we wiped that disease out in those communities, but they have to supplement.
Fantastic.
Now, that's an extreme case, but it's an illustration what's happening on a lower level in industrialized nations. Because, for instance, a omnivore, somebody who eats dairy and meat and eggs and fish and so forth, they're going to get a little bit of something, especially if they're eating animal products, because animals are supplemented, right? So they're going to get a little bit of something. And you wonder why the people who, when you look at the long-lived people on Earth, the top 20 longevity cultures, my wife and I wrote a book called Immortality, where we looked at that. That was the question we looked at. Who lives the longest? Because we were bombarded by people saying, well, my diet's the best, my diet's the best, my diet's. So we looked at these top 20 longevity cultures, and we didn't pick them. The National Geographic picked them. We gleaned through 60 years of National Geographic, and they actually had special issues on these top 20 longevity cultures. Now, I was always amazed that they never put them all in one issue. And so we put all these cultures into one issue, one magazine, one giant book actually called Immortality. And we actually, over 10 years, through the National Geographic, through the universities in the countries in which these people live, we looked at the soil analyses, where these people lived. We looked at anthropology studies on them, what they ate and what their cultures did and so forth, how they got there. And this is all in this book, by the way. Immortality shows you how these illiterate countries, these third world cultures, outlive us and are healthier than us. It's by dumb luck. By dumb luck, they happened to pick a place. Either they were chased there by their enemies, or they picked this place because there's a lot of game there to eat, a lot of animals to eat, wild animals. And by dumb luck, they have 60 or more minerals there. And so as they're putting their wood ashes in the gardens, they're recycling those 60 minerals. Some of them have 70, some of them have 80 minerals, and they're putting them all back in the gardens, and they're eating the plants that suck these nutrients up. But they're supplementing with those minerals by putting wood ashes in their gardens. It's an indirect supplementation, although a lot of them do put wood ashes in their food. They don't have flour to thicken things with, and so they will thicken a lot of like stews and soups with wood ashes, so they're getting the minerals directly that way. And so they do supplement, and this is something we've missed ever since we've given up wood as our common fuel. And maybe people could do a better job as vegans 100 years ago back, if they by dumb luck lived in a place that had enough minerals in the soil and they were putting wood ashes in their garden and consuming wood ashes. They could, as a vegan, survive and do very well. But now we don't do that, so now they have to supplement.
So that kind of takes me back to the whole concept a lot of vegetarians talk about is plant foods having amino acids. Let's talk a little bit about amino acids and protein, complete protein versus incomplete protein. Let's talk about that a little.
Well, again, that's the mantra that vegans talk about. They're talking about proteins. They're always talking about protein. We mix seeds and beans and grains to guarantee the right amount of amino acids and protein. Well, amino acids are the building blocks for protein. Amino acids are the building block for proteins. Proteins are made up of combinations of amino acids. When you look at a protein as a string of amino acids, and when you begin to digest them, you don't just break them down immediately into all individual amino acids. They're broken down into strings of amino acids, short strings, from long strings to short strings. These are called polypeptides. Okay? If you absorb these polypeptides, which most people do, and you have nutritional deficiencies, you can't fend these things off, you become allergic to them. Your body recognizes them as wheat or corn or potato or pea or strawberries or whatever it might be, because you're not digesting these things down to the individual amino acids before you absorb them. And this is a great research project where they actually show where you could absorb digestive enzymes, and these digestive enzymes, they would take them from your blood, and still they worked as an enzyme after taken from your blood. The digestion process didn't denature the enzyme. I found that very fascinating. People get hung up, particularly vegans and vegetarians of various types, ovo-vegetarians, ovo-lacto-vegetarians, ovo-lacto-piscopoio-vegetarians. They get hung up on the protein thing. That's only one of the 90 essential nutrient group. You need to go and make sure you're getting all 90. Don't get fixated on the protein.
And so, is it a challenge, though? Even, say, for instance, like myself, a person has been using all 90 essential nutrients and using a protein supplement. Is there still challenges? For instance, cholesterol. Is that a challenge for a vegan?
Okay, well, protein, you can eat enough beans and grains to get protein. Now you've introduced a new word here, cholesterol. Now, this is a different story. You have to appreciate that 85% of the weight of every cell wall in your body is cholesterol. You have steroid hormones such as testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, and adrenal hormones, which are 85% or 90% by weight cholesterol. So your adrenal hormones, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, are all steroid hormones, and they're 85 to 9% by weight cholesterol. So if you're not eating cholesterol, you cannot make enough. You cannot make enough to get all the hormones you need. You cannot make enough, rebuild and maintain your brain. 75%, 75% of your brain weight is the myelin, the white matter of the brain, and 100% of the white matter of the brain, the myelin of the brain, the insulation material of the brain is cholesterol. And so if you think you're going to get through life and live a long, healthful life and not be, have dementia or depressed or manic depression and so on, without either supplementing with cholesterol, take a cholesterol soft gel capsule like we take fish oil capsules, or eating eggs and fat from meat, you're living in la la land. You just can't do it. You can't make enough for your own needs.
So how much cholesterol in comparison to how much does the body make in comparison to what you need?
About 5%. The body makes about 5%.
Body makes about 5% of the cholesterol that your body needs.
If you go on a complete cholesterol-free diet, you will not live very long. You just can't. And I always tell people, okay, if veganism was the optimal way to live, and I call veganism more of a political diet as opposed to, save the earth and don't eat animals. You can feed 100 people for what you can feed one cow. And so I look at it as a political diet as opposed to a nutritional diet, unless it's supplement. You can do it supplementary.
Okay, so I was comparing, we had talked about protein, but I said we can supplement with protein, but the cholesterol piece, was that an issue with vegans?
Yes. Okay. And so the cholesterol piece, you have to supplement with cholesterol. You have to eat cholesterol every day. Again, when you look at vegans as a group, and you take an average lifespan of vegans, you take the average lifespan of all peoples in the world, and then you take an average lifespan of all vegans in the world, the vegans are not going to live as long as the people who get animal proteins, because attached to animal proteins is cholesterol. I'm going to start looking at the rates of emotional problems with vegans: depression, manic depression, bipolar disease, anxiety attacks, panic attacks. I'm going to start looking at adrenal exhaustion. I'm going to look at things like dementias, Alzheimer's disease, infertility, miscarriages, and I guarantee it's much higher in vegans as a group than it is in meat eaters, or at least people who eat animal protein. You don't have to eat meat. You can eat eggs and fish and that kind of stuff. If I had to pick one animal protein, I would pick eggs. I would take eggs because of the cholesterol associated with it.
So we talked earlier about the different types of vegetarians in the U.S. And so is there really any difference? Because I know vegetarians like to differentiate. The ones that are only eating fish think that they're better off by avoiding the red meat or avoiding the chicken. Is there any real difference between the types of protein, including egg?
When you're talking about animal protein, again, when you look at the biological value, this is well documented. The U.S. Department of Agriculture did this. Egg protein, 100. Dairy protein is 85. Red meat is 65. Beans and nuts, and there's not much protein in nuts, mostly fat, but not cholesterol. It's saturated fat. Beans and nuts, their protein, you're looking at 62 to 65% biological value. We're looking at grains, it's down to 42 to 45%. And so by mixing grains and nuts and legumes, you're better off because you're raising that biological value up for yourself. And again, to me, it's a political statement more than a viable nutritional thing. Because can you find me any colonies of vegans, Dirk, where they weaned the baby off the mother's breast milk at, say, a year old, 2 years old, 4 years old, doesn't matter. They weaned the baby off the mother's breast milk, and they went immediately to a vegan diet. And there's hundreds of kids, happy, giggly kids running around.
Well, I think more what you're talking about in terms of political and religious organizations that become vegetarian or vegan because of those reasons. I don't know if any other cultures otherwise. Yeah. But I was more addressing sometimes people want to think that their type of vegetarianism, for instance, a lacto or a ovo or pesco might think that it's better for them to eat this way. It's significantly no difference. There's really
not true. Again, egg protein and dairy protein are much higher in the biological value system. Okay.
But they're still eating animal protein.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well,
and they're still, and the reason I bring that up is because typically people are so afraid of cholesterol. And no matter what animal protein you're eating, you're getting cholesterol. And so the value, you're saying egg is the best, and then I think it was chicken was better than red meat and so forth and so on. But I was just trying to make a point in terms of you're still getting you're still eating animal protein, you're still eating cholesterol, and there are some values that are higher in some of the proteins, but you're still eating animal protein. So you're not really a vegetarian. In other words, that's my whole point. Yeah, you're omnivore. You're a person that eats animal and vegetables.
Yeah, and so people who are not vegans are really omnivores as opposed to vegetarians.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about energy from a meat source versus a vegetable source. What's the difference there?
Well, depending on what vegetable. If you're getting energy from lettuce, you're going to have to work real hard to get. If you get energy from a potato, it costs you 4 times more in terms of B vitamins than it does if you're getting energy from meat, red meat. Because protein and fats are cheaper to burn in terms of cofactors as opposed to carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are very expensive to burn from terms of cofactors. And so the worst thing we do in the world, Dirk, is when you have these famines, you have these disasters around the world, natural disasters and famines.
We send grain.
We send rice, right?
Rice.
We send them white rice. And we're sending them plane loads and boat loads and truckloads of white rice, and then they all die. They all get beriberi, and they all get pellagra, and they all die congestive heart failure and kwashiorkor and all this kind of stuff. We'd be much better off to give them the 90 essential nutrients and a protein bar and with bags of rice. And again, this is all from advice being given to them by consulting doctors to the UN and to governments all over the world. People's diet is they're primarily eating rice. So let's send them rice. No, they're eating chicken eggs, they're eating fish, they're eating monkeys that they catch, they're eating, they're birds, and they're eating goat meat and cheese and milk and everything. Even the Maasai, they live on cattle blood and milk. And you look at them and man, they're 7 foot tall, they're very healthy people, and they live on milk and blood. And the secret though is they live in places that have lots of minerals in the soil. And so the sweet potatoes and things like that they do eat, the poi and stuff that they eat, are grown in soil that they're putting their wood ashes back in there. They happen to live in places that have lots of minerals. And so it's more than the superficial look. And people tend to not having the other knowledge. They don't know what questions to ask. So they visit there and they say, well, these people they're living on rice. You look at the Chinese, they're living on rice. Well, yeah, but the Chinese eat more animal protein per person. I think there was a book out called The China Study. And he said everybody in China is a vegetarian of some type or vegan. Well, the only vegans and vegetarians in China are American visitors who are vegans.
Well, what about Buddhists? There are a lot of Buddhists that are vegetarians also.
They're vegetarians, they're not vegans. They will drink milk and cheese and stuff like that. Yeah.
So they'll do that. So they're a lacto-ovo philosophy as opposed to being vegan. And I remember back in the 60s and 70s when athletes, for instance, were on a high-protein diet, and then late 70s and 80s moved to a high-carb diet, that philosophy. Who's better off doing that?
In the long haul, the ones who are eating a high-protein diet were better off than the ones that ate a high-carb diet. Remember, carbohydrates are more expensive in terms of cofactors needed to get the energy extracted from as opposed to protein. And when you look at some of the crazy things professional athletes do, jump in the stands and beat up paying customers, and they do crazy things. They can't control themselves, and that's because they lose these nutrients so fast because they've carbed up. They carb up the night before. That was actually invented by the wife of a Canadian. His name was Brian Maxwell. He had run 100 marathons. He had 14 gold medals running the marathon, and his wife invented the power bar and went for the carbs, and she invented the carb up the night before, and that way you had more energy to run your race because they were looking at the glycogen, the animal starch stored in your liver and muscles and so forth. And it was just one of those terrible things they created, because what happens is when you carb up, you're going to have energy for a while, and then you crash. Then you go into a state of depression. You go into a state of depression after a while because your blood sugar is dropping like a rock. And this doesn't happen when you eat protein, because when you have protein mixed with fat, it stabilizes your blood sugar. And now they've gone back to eating, a steak the night before and eggs for breakfast before a big event, whether it's football or basketball or soccer or a run.
Yeah, I was a college basketball player, and I remember doing those mid to late 70s. We would eat steak and eggs for pregame meals, and that was pretty much the standard back then.
And you'd stabilize your blood sugar, and you'd have enough nutrients to perform at a very high ebb. And the ones who still practice carbing up the night before will crash somewhere in the middle of the game.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the positives about being a vegetarian. For instance, the high antioxidant levels, which will increase your immune system, high fiber, high water, and even the 1970s work done by Dr. Dean Ornish in terms of clearing the arteries of some of his patients using a vegetarian diet. Let's address some of the positives, I guess, and to what degree they are positive.
Well, sure. There are positives to a vegan diet, but again, you can't let those positives
blind you.
Well, yeah, thank you. Blind you to ignoring the negatives, right? What you want to do is get the positives from a vegan diet and then supplement and make up the deficiencies of the negatives, and you're fine. And I find people like yourself who've been a vegan for at least 20 years that I know of, and you're extremely well. You do your martial arts. You're a martial arts master, and I'm so very proud of you that you supplement heavily. And you're an example of what a vegan can be. You're as fit and tough physically as a vegan can be, and you've been very faithful to the vegan diet. I know this. I've known you for 15 years. But you supplement properly, and you make up the deficiencies, and so whatever you get from your food is value added. Now, one of the things we have learned about eating more vegetables and fruits and things of that nature is that the antioxidants will help fend off certain diseases. You can reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease, you can reduce your risk of dementias, you can reduce your risk of cataracts, you can reduce your risk of cancer by getting your ORAC points, your antioxidant points, above 100,000 ORAC points a day. And ORAC points, it's an acronym that was coined by the U.S. Department of Agriculture called Oxygen Radical Absorption Capacity. It's a measurement of how many free radicals are actually neutralized by the antioxidants in the food. And of course, antioxidants come in many forms. Let's just look at the one that's produced by the body. The most potent one produced by the body is called glutathione. This is one of the most potent antioxidants out there, but if you don't have enough selenium, one of the things that happens is one molecule of glutathione will knock off one molecule of a free radical, and it's done. It generates more. If you're supplementing with selenium in proper amounts, that selenium will recycle that one molecule of glutathione, so it might work against it. One molecule of glutathione in the presence of selenium might knock off 1,000 molecules of a free radical.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and so you can't just think in terms of the antioxidants you get either from the food or that's produced by your body when you're eating that food. And so you do have to bring in all the support cofactors to guarantee it's all going to work properly. So ORAC points is a way of measuring that. And of course, one of the things we know result in anti-aging effects are the antioxidants you find in dark berries, including grapes. Black grapes and purple and blue grapes have more antioxidants in them than green grapes. If you look at something as simple as resveratrol, which is the stuff that is given credit for the French living 10 years longer than us, they say, well, it's the French paradox. They live 10 years longer than us because they wean their babies off of breast milk onto wine. They don't even drink water, right? And resveratrol. So I like to take in the equivalent of about 900 glasses of red wine a day in terms of resveratrol supplementation. And so I'm getting the antioxidant power of 900 glasses of red wine a day as opposed to drinking 900 glasses of red wine. Of course, you wouldn't get that far. You'd be unconscious from anesthesia from all the alcohol.
But my understanding, too, is even eating a very good vegetarian diet, I understand one serving of a fruit or a vegetable will only give you about 600 ORAC points, compared to a supplement program where you can take, as you said, anywhere from 50 to 100,000 very easily per day.
Yes.
So the challenge is, even if you are super duper vegetarian and you ate 20 servings of fruits and vegetables per day, which most people won't do, you would never get past 10,000, 12,000 ORAC points.
Yes.
And that's
exactly
not sufficient to help fight off diseases.
You're exactly right. And of course, you take in, what would you say, 200 servings of fruits?
No, I said 20.
Oh, 20. Yeah, you're going to get screaming diarrhea with all that fiber and fruits and vegetables, right? And so I like dark chocolate. We have a lot of dark chocolate products, and dark chocolate is a wonderful way to get ORAC points. And you can take a good quality dark chocolate liquid that has 3,000 ORAC points per ounce. We have a piece of chocolate the size of a pat of butter. You take two of those little pieces of dark chocolate that have, or the size of a pat of butter, have the amount of antioxidants in it that you get in 25 servings of fruits and vegetables. It'll give you 33,000 ORAC points to eat two pieces of this chocolate.
And, that's, and it's vegetarian friendly.
Oh, it is. It is. It's vegan. It's vegan friendly.
Okay.
It's vegan friendly. Plus, it has the flavonols to help lower blood pressure. It's just, they're wonderful things. And of course, all vegans should be using our dark chocolate because you can take, I take 6 pieces a day, so I'm getting over 100,000 ORAC points a day.
And so whatever you get from your food is value added.
Now you got it. That's the secret to making this work. Whether you're a vegan, a vegetarian, whether you're an ovo-lacto vegetarian, whether you're a meat eater, whether you're a meat and potatoes kind of guy, if you supplement, you're leveling the playing field. So no matter what your dietary choices are, whatever value you get from your food is value added. You know, you look at a medical doctor who gets less than 30 minutes of nutritional training and 14 years of medical school and residency and internship. These guys say, well, eat lots of variety and put 4 different colors on your plate. That's insane when we spent $100 billion tripling the lifespan of dogs, eliminating 900 different diseases that still plague humans by making sure they had all the nutrients in their food.
Yeah, and the science is there. And too often I find in natural health that people will approach me and say, where'd you get that from? I don't believe it. My doctor never told me that. Well, their science is there, you just haven't read it. And I always tell people also, you don't ride in a horse and buggy anymore. You drive a car. I personally don't wash my dishes by hand. I put it in a dishwasher. I mean, if the science is there, use it. And certainly the science is there that nutritional supplementation is so important, and it's such a struggle to get people to understand that.
Well, all you have to do is look at the lifespan of a doctor. Even a vegan doctor, the average lifespan is 56. Why would you go to a group of guys and gals whose average lifespan is 56 to learn how to live to be 100 in a healthful way? They're not the go-to people. As one of my colleagues, Dr. Glidden, always says, God bless their little hearts, just love them to pieces, but it should be a felony for them to give advice when it comes to nutrition. They're patients a disservice whenever they give them advice about nutrition.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the negatives about vegetarianism. For instance, those that have a high starch, high carb diet. Talk a little bit about B12 deficiency, and also like to discuss some of the conditions that may arise from pregnant women, children, and young teens, all of those sort of things.
Let's start out on the front end here. Let's start out with conception. Most of the infertility problems that occur in the world are caused by malnutrition. And I see a lot of people, many of whom are vegans, who are infertile. They just can't get pregnant. How do I get pregnant? Well, how many eggs are you eating? Well, none. I'm a vegan. Well, there you go. And so I say, well, I want you to eat, say 130 to 150 pound woman. I say, I want you to eat 4 eggs every day. I can't do that. Well, you're not going to get pregnant. You ever have miscarriage? Yeah, I've had 4 miscarriages. Well, that means you're not sterile because you can get pregnant. You just can't hold the pregnancy. What do you supplement? Well, I'm a purist. I just eat very well and I get everything I need from my food. Well, no. Let's say you have a pregnancy. In an unsupplemented vegan, the odds of you having a baby that has some biochemical or physical problems can be very high. Cleft palate, spina bifida, neural tube defects, things like heart defects of all kind, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome is very high.
Cystic fibrosis.
Muscular dystrophy. What I find is, Dirk, and I work with large colonies of certain cultures that, as much as 30 to 50% of the births in those cultures are cystic fibrosis and muscular dystrophy. The men die at average age of 62 with cardiomyopathy, heart disease, all of which is a selenium deficiency. And so it's imperative when you know these things in a community and not to supplement and just keep going to fertility clinics hoping that this pregnancy will be the good one.
And paying thousands of
$25,000 for in vitro fertilization, artificial insemination. And they're getting pregnant naturally, sexual intercourse. They just can't hold the pregnancy because they don't have enough nutrition to hold the pregnancy. So I get more women pregnant than any other man in history. I get about 25,000. I mean, the only one that I can't keep up with is the history of Solomon, right? He had 300 wives. But I get about 25,000 women pregnant every year. But it's always from nutrition, regulating what they eat, eliminating gluten, adding the 90 essential nutrients, and then you can eat whatever diet you want.
So what about some of the deficiency conditions like B12, iron deficiency, anemia? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, these are very common in people who are vegans. Again, both of those are nutrient deficiencies, right? And vitamin B12 is sort of a weird vitamin in that it has a mineral attached to it, cobalt, okay? And so when you're deficient in B12, several things can be happening. Number one, you might supplement with B12 and still be deficient in B12 if you don't have enough stomach acid. Well, how much salt do you eat? Well, none. My doctor told me to cut back on my salt, so I just get enough from my food. Really? And you have a B12 deficiency. Well, yeah, so I have to take B12 shot because I've tried supplementation, won't work. Well, that's because you're not making enough stomach acid because you require salt, sodium chloride to make stomach acid. And so even if you supplement with B12 and you're not making stomach acid, you can't absorb it because there's a factor produced by the stomach called intrinsic factor. I guess the whole name is Castle's intrinsic factor. And it binds with vitamin B12 in the presence of stomach acid to be absorbed. Minerals can't, particularly iron, can't, since you brought that up, iron specifically has to be absorbed in an acid environment. If you're drinking, and I sell alkaline water, I love alkaline water, but not during meals because it neutralizes your stomach acid and you won't be able to absorb nutrients efficiently. I see an enormous number of people who are very, very ill with maybe 20 different diseases because they can't absorb nutrients. They're drinking structured alkaline water with meals. So we have all kinds of problems going on here that affect what goes on in your stomach. And even if you supplement, you could be deficient in these things. So iron is very tricky. B12 is very tricky. Digesting proteins is very tricky. Even if you're eating good protein, regardless of the source, and you're not making stomach acid, then pepsin, the enzyme produced by the stomach to digest protein down into the amino acids, which are then easily absorbed and don't cause allergies, you'll wind up absorbing polypeptides because you don't have enough stomach acid for the pepsin to work properly. And I find it interesting. People always want to say, well, cooking in microwaves destroys the enzymes in my food. Well, you don't need enzymes in your food because you produce all the enzymes you need if you're getting a perfect diet.
Oh, that's a great lead-in, Doc. Live foodist or raw foodist concept. Because too often they're purist in their philosophy that I'm not going to cook anything. I'm not going to raise the temperature above 117 degrees. I'm going to get all the enzymes and get all these great things. And you just share with us the body will make enzymes if you're healthy. And another point that I want to make on that same note, those people are typically very health conscious people. Like most vegetarians, they're trying to be healthy, but unfortunately they only have bits and pieces of information. They don't have enough information to complete the circle. They're in trouble, unfortunately.
Exactly right. And it's the pieces that are left out that cause the problem. Cook improperly. When you eat improperly, when you supplement improperly, you're going to have problems. And because vegans tend to be very strict, and you know, there's breatharians and there's raw foodists and so forth, and most people can't handle a raw food diet because there are phytates in raw vegetables and grains, whole grain. Phytates are the things that make a carrot pop when you break it in half. It snaps. Phytates are what makes hull or the bran on wheat hard and shiny. It's the thing that makes the seeds on the pods of a pea snap when you break it. And these phytates bind onto your dietary minerals into an indigestible, unabsorbable compound which goes out the other end into the toilet. You're going to eat very well, and the more raw food you eat, the more you're in danger from phytates. Again, in chapter 11 of that book, Rare Earths Ben Cures, I have a whole big section in that chapter 11 on phytates and the hazard of eating raw foods constantly, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You're going to be in trouble, especially if you don't supplement.
I think most of the raw foodists are typically marinating their foods, and so they're not actually eating it in its rawest, I guess if that's a word, rawest state. They're doing some sort of marinating and eliminating that pop or snap that you're talking about. But the enzyme piece is not factual, is it, Doc?
No, you don't need enzymes from your food. You make all the enzymes, digestive and absorption enzymes you need. You make all this. In fact, that's what DNA and RNA do, is they make enzymes, because we are enzyme beings. You can't use oxygen without enzymes. You can't use food without enzymes. You can't create energy or burn energy without enzymes. And so you've been provided with all that you need in your body. You don't need to be eating it, but you do need to eat the raw materials and the cofactors necessary for those enzymes to work.
Okay. Well, let me ask you one more thing. One of the, I guess, prideful things that vegetarians talk about is having a low-fat diet. What's the challenge with having a low-fat diet, vegetarians?
Okay, there's two problems with a low-fat diet. Number one, we are a fat-eating organism. Human beings are. We require fat. In fact, as much as 60 to 70% of your calories should come from fat. You know, medical doctors say that less than 30%. They want you down 26%, 24% of your calories coming from fat. Really, we should be having 60 to 70% of your calories coming from fat. Number one, to stabilize your blood sugar. And you don't get obese when you eat fat. What do you think about that? When they fatten cattle for Ruth Chris's Steakhouse to make them prime beef, right? Or you go to the Hilton in New York City and you want a prime steak. I mean, you want 2 inches of fat on it. You want all that beautiful marbling in the middle, and it's so tender you can cut it with a fork. Do they feed those cattle fat or whole grains?
Whole grain.
Boink. The reason why we're the number one obese nation in the world is because we've been told to eat whole grains. Now, eating whole grains in the absence of minerals, you will get fat. You will develop diabetes. And so that's very problematic. Whole fat is good for you. Chicken fat, not fried, roasted, raw, baked is good. That's for the French. Do you think that a 5-star French chef is going to bake a croissant for the president of France using canola oil and margarine? No, he's going to use eggs and cream and butter and lard.
Absolutely. And
they live 10 years longer than us, all right? Also, you have the essential fatty acids, right? You need omega-3s, 6s, and 9s, which are fats, whether it's plant fats or animal fats. Some sources of these fats, like plant, have maybe 8%. Some oils have only 8% essential fatty acids, like olive oil, and that's 8 to 12% omega-3s. You look at flaxseed oil, 78%. You look at
borage.
Borage oil is very high.
Primrose oil.
Primrose oil is very high, up 78%. But also, when you look at fish oil, you look at a very high. Salmon oil is 78% omega-3. So there's certain plant oils that are the same as fish oils, but there's certain plants that are very, very low, and you couldn't eat enough to get what you need. We use fat very efficiently for energy. It doesn't cost you a lot of cofactors, so it's cheaper to burn fat for fuel in terms of cofactors than it is to burn carbohydrate. Fat is very important to human beings. We should be eating 60 to 70% of our calories coming from fat. And by chance, then, you're going to get more of the essential fatty acids, but depending on what the animal ate. For instance, if you eat a deer and eat the fat from the deer, or eat the fat from chicken that's been fed beans, a lot of beans in their diet, they're going to have more omega-3s in it than if they're just fed wheat only.
Okay.
And we need fat to, again, for energy. We need it to make our brains and we need the cholesterol that's in fat to make steroid hormones, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, adrenal hormones. So people who are on a strict fat-free diet are not going to make it.
Okay. And last part that I'd like to discuss with you, Doc, many times vegetarians will pose certain questions about meat and why we shouldn't eat it. For instance, there are pharmaceutical drugs in meat, antibiotics, hormones, pesticide residue. They also talk about processed meats, the dangers of cancer, carcinogenic effect of processed meats, parasites, bacteria, high levels of adrenal hormones in animal flesh. Let's talk about that a little bit, the bad part that vegetarians talk about in terms of meat eating.
Well, certainly they're quite correct. I give them they're quite correct when it comes to processed meats with nitrates and nitrites, and it does increase your risk of cancer, increase your risk of cardiovascular disease, particularly arteriosclerosis, atherosclerosis, because elevated blood cholesterol and triglycerides do not cause coronary artery disease or any vascular disease. Elevated blood cholesterol or triglycerides do not cause stroke or high blood pressure or cardiovascular disease or plugging of the arteries, coronary thrombosis, pulmonary embolism, deep vein thrombosis. It has nothing to do with cholesterol, and it has nothing to do with triglycerides. It has everything to do with eating things like processed meats with nitrates and nitrites, eating fried foods, even eating stir-fried foods of organically grown vegetables with extra virgin olive oil. That's why in 1971, when I did that study comparing the coronary arteries blockages from vegans during meat eaters, the vegans had the worst plugged arteries. And the thing you have to appreciate from, again, the fat and the cholesterol is that these are essential nutrients, and we must have them. You have to get them somewhere. You can't make enough. High-fat diets are useful for us. For instance, I can take people with Parkinson's disease and give them the 90 essential nutrients and a couple of what we call our secret sauces, and give them 12 to 15 eggs a day, and I can eliminate all Parkinson's symptoms in 3 months. People who have dementia have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease by 4 very well-respected neurologists, and including the head of the Department of Neurology at a medical school diagnosed this guy with Alzheimer's disease. In 1 week's time, they declared him cured on my program.
That's great.
Because he had to eat 12 eggs a day, right? Because it was replacing his brain, plus the 90 essential nutrients. And I do this literally thousands of times a year, fixing people with these neurological problems. Adrenal exhaustion is a cholesterol deficiency disease, is a fat deficiency disease. And I know I see so many people with adrenal exhaustion when you go to these health fairs and trade shows, people who try to eat right, they're doing their best, or their heart's in the right place, they're trying to eat right. I have no disrespect for them from that place. And I always tell them, if you want to be a vegan, you can be a successful vegan like my good friend here, Dirk Twine. If you just supplement properly, you can do it. And so if being a vegan is that important to you, you need to supplement, do it correctly, and you'll be fine. But if you don't supplement, you're every morning you're waking up playing that game, throwing those dice, and snake eyes comes up.
Absolutely. So basically, Doc, the point that I tried to make initially was the vegan is the one that is in the greatest danger.
That's correct.
The other forms of vegetarianism, you're getting a lot that the body needs. Piece that the vegan is missing is particularly the cholesterol piece and the fat piece.
And the minerals.
And the mineral piece.
Yeah.
But all types need the 90 essential nutrients, the 60 minerals, the 16 vitamins, the 12 amino acids, the 3 fatty acids. Everybody needs that. Every living, breathing, walking human being.
And all vertebrates, hummingbirds, elephants, snakes, fish, all need it.
Okay. And so with the essential nutrients, the other types other than the vegan type, they're in very good condition if good shape if they're supplementing with all 90 essential nutrients.
If they're supplementing, that
if
caveat.
They're supplementing with all 90 essential nutrients.
They're in good shape.
But the vegan, even with supplementation, there's some challenges that we have to be aware of.
That's right.
And so it's very important that we know this and understand this. And for me personally, I became a vegan as I searched for healthy eating ways. I didn't become a vegan for any other reason other than seeking good health. And so as we learn more, we should do more. And so I think it's very important. And I wanted to share that information. I want to thank you again, Doc, because as I said, I've been a vegan for almost 20 years. I feel compelled to share this information with others so that they can be healthy and live a long, healthy life. And I really appreciate all the work that you've done. And you're far from being a vegetarian and sharing this information so that the vegetarian community and vegetarian family can live long, healthy lives. All Americans can live long, healthy lives. All people of the world with this information can live long, healthy lives.
You're exactly right. There's no reason why everybody can't live to be well beyond 100. A human being has the capacity to live long, well beyond 100. The fact that we don't has nothing to do with genetics. It has to do with nutritional deficiencies. I always tell people, if you're not prepared to supplement properly, what you're saying is there's too much bother for you to take supplements and kind of understand why you need to take them and pass that on to your children. It's more important to just forget that stuff because it's too much problem for you to deal with it than having 50 more years with your grandkids. Because if you supplement properly, you're going to get 50 more years with your grandkids. To me, that's worth everything. I'd pluck my eyes out and cut my arms off for 50 more years with my grandkids.
Right.
And so just changing my diet a little bit and supplementing, that's a small price to pay for 50 more years with your grandkids.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dr.
God bless you, Dirk. Keep up the great
All
work.
right, thank you. This CD is not intended to diagnose, prescribe, or treat any diseases. It is your responsibility to consult your personal health care practitioner prior to beginning any type of health and wellness program. Also, ask the person that gave you this CD for more information about Dr. Wallach and his nutritional products.